able to provide tools that are essential to Africa. Africa being mostly rural with lack of infrastructure, we need to bring portable infrastructure that is affordable, that it can be user-friendly and be easily interpreted in different languages in Africa, so that we really play a prominent role in the diagnostic space in Africa.
Where do you see the greatest needs in terms of diagnostics, because you're already involved in this space? Where do you think that we need to be doing more work, and which direction are you interested in taking CapeBio towards, diagnostics in particular? Thank you for joining us on the HSS podcast with me, Lenias Hwenda. This is the Titans of Industry podcast series, where we talk to leaders who are building Africa's manufacturing industry for vaccines, medicines, and medical devices. We are not talking enough about the unmet needs for diagnostics and how that affects access to treatment and care in many therapeutic areas across the African continent, including in neglected tropical diseases where rapid point-of-care diagnostics are completely lacking. The African Union has set the ambitious target to increase vaccine manufacturing on the African continent from 1% to 60% by 2040. Achieving that ambition requires reagents and diagnostics to enable the clinical development and testing of products that are manufactured on the African continent. My next guest today is Daniel Ndima, the CEO of CapeBio, a South African biotech company that is pioneering in best-in-class molecular diagnostics, molecular research regions, and enzyme kits sourced from South Africa, South Africa's microbial hotspots. He is the founding CEO of CapeBio Technologies, a new South African applied genomics and biotech company that spun out of the CSIR. CapeBio develops molecular biology reagents, enzymes, and kits to empower African scientists who are doing research and development, institutions and companies, in order to help them in their efforts to innovate in their respective academic research and diagnostics. As a scientist, Daniel specializes in structural biology of infectious diseases. He's a protein engineer trained in protein crystallography, bioprocess engineering, and biomanufacturing. He worked for the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research in South Africa towards the commercialization of technologies, and as a technologist and business developer. Daniel, welcome to the HSS podcast. Let's talk about health in Africa.
Good morning, Lenias. Thank you for welcoming me.
Wonderful. I'm glad that we could find a moment to talk, Daniel. So CapeBio Technologies is an applied genomics biotech company that spun out of CSIR. Can you tell us more about how that happened, how your journey started?
My journey was actually a long one. I found myself entering CSIR, seeking opportunities to establish an entity. CSIR was very welcoming, and they actually paired me with a research group that was led by Dr. Who really mentored me around technology development, of best in class. And we got funding from South African government through Department of Science Innovation to establish this project, looking at localizing key reagents for DNA analysis for research purposes, but also for diagnostics. So we launched the company around 2018 from the CSIR using private investments from E-Squared Investments, which is a subsidiary of Allen Gray Limited. Being an Allen Gray fellow, I was fortunate enough to get support from the E-Squared investments. And that's how we launched our business. We started operating in the US before the pandemic, distributing these products there. And then we started to increasing our product portfolio to ensure that we are aligned with the needs of the African market. because Africa and South Africa are net importers of these critical reagents that are basically very important for our healthcare management. And this has actually been eroding tax base in Africa, where you spend large sums of your budget as a government, importing these reagents. So we saw the gap. We say this is where we need to play. Using our skills and our background, we need to make sure that we create capacity for Africa, and ensuring that we deliver excellent innovations that improve quality of life of Africans. So this has been our purpose since the inception, and we are happy that we became the first company on the continent to get a PCR test approved by regulators, and to put South Africa and Africa on a map as also contributors of those that provide reagents that manage the current COVID-19 pandemic. That's our journey.
Wonderful. Now, a very, very exciting journey, and congratulations for being the first African company to have an approved PCR test, for helping scientists across the continent. I think that's really huge. We need to celebrate that for sure. But yes, you're right that we on the continent, the people on the continent, we are spending way too much importing medical products. I think an estimated 14.5 billion US dollars that is spent on just importing products every year. No, at the moment, I think 1% of vaccines are made on the continent, but we don't even know the proportion of reagents, which is something that is really needed for all of these ambitions that we have to increase manufacturing of vaccines or pharmaceuticals. It all starts with the reagents, the research, and you are stepping into that gap to make sure that we have that. So as an applied genomics company on the continent, probably there aren't very many. How many across the continent of this kind of companies are you aware of? And do you collaborate with each other? What is the kind of environment that you have out there for your kind of companies?
So in South Africa, we were the second successful biotechnology company. I'll say success in brackets, because success has many definitions. But companies that actually made through to enter the market, the mainstream economy. The first one was founded by Americans that came to Cape Town. It was called CapeBio System. Really, it motivated a lot of us as researchers to say, this is possible. And at a later stage, it got sold to Roche. It became a Roche company, and as a result, we were still coming through during that time, doing our research and ensuring that we have products that compete very well with their products, and together with products that are coming out of the US. And now, Kapa being, not being a South African or an African company anymore because it's been bought, we became the only one in the space. On the continent, really, we have mostly distributors of imports from China, from Europe, from US. Those are the entities that we compete with as a manufacturer and manufacturer, wholesale, and distributor. And we work with some of these distributors to distribute our products throughout the continent. We don't really have a lot of companies coming out of research innovation spaces. We only have a lot of researchers that are coming out of the space, and the industry really is dominated by the multinationals. So, you can, check, North Africa and look at how many companies exist there. You realize that those that exist there are probably coming from France. If you come down to South Africa, you find that you've got US-based companies that have this distribution warehouse in South Africa. They don't have research and development and manufacturing facilities. They just bring their products so that they can be distributed throughout the continent. So we remain one of the few companies that are in the space, but in our space, in applied genomics, in applied biotechnology, research and development, and manufacturing, we still are the only company that does this on the continent. And we're hoping that, we can open the value chain so that we can have many other role players to come through, to participate, because our value chain is quite a long one, and we tend to play across that value chain. So we need to be able to plug other companies in that value chain so that we can focus on research and development and manufacturing. And we have downstream and upstream requirements, and we require other partners to come through, because we do have researchers of high note. And if you have heard that South Africa detected Omicron variant, and our product is one of the products that preliminarily detected that, and we had to confirm that by sequencing, working with the government and other stakeholders. So meaning that we have top-notch researchers in the country, but not only in South Africa but across the continent. What we really need to do is to ensure that we translate this knowledge to tangible products, technologies, and innovations and services that improve quality of Africans' lives. So we just need to be able to be brave enough to convert our knowledge into economic prospects, because we have got so much to offer, not only for the continent, but for the world at large.
That is a really important point you're making about the value chain being long and the need for more parties, for more people to be involved along that value chain, so that you're able to actually, each one is able to focus on their strengths, and which would actually make that value chain even stronger. And it seems that at CapeBio, you've been very lucky in getting the support that you needed from the beginning to help you to rise to that level where you are creating products that are contributing to the detection of Omicron, for example, and to the pathogen genomic surveillance that is going on across the continent. I think that's really fantastic, and a great example of why it's so important for companies such as CapeBio to be supported, so that they're able to create products that are suitable for this context, and that can be competitive on the international stage. We will go a little bit deeper, Daniel, a little bit later into what it means for you being one of very, very few, if not the only one, making reagents and diagnostics on the continent and having to compete with a lot of products that from established multinationals. But for now, let's talk a little bit more about your products. So CapeBio is developing the best-in-class molecular diagnostics and reagents and enzymes, which are sourced from South African, from the South African environment. What can you tell us about your molecular diagnostic products and the range of uses, that applications that they have at the moment?
The first thing that I want to highlight is that the diagnostic assays that we develop have the same quality of those that are approved by FDA and CE mark. They rank the same because we use the same criteria as WHO, and our regulator is one of the top regulators in the world, and producing these products of the international quality and standards means that we've got something unique about our business, because we don't source the enzymes from Europe or from China or from America. We source them from our own biodiversity hotspots. I don't know if you are aware that South Africa has a third largest biodiversity area in the world. It's the third largest, after your Amazons and others, and the other one. And it boasts close to 70% of plant species are only found in that area. It's what we call Cape Floral Kingdom, which spans between Western Cape Province, Northern Cape, and Eastern Cape. That's where CapeBio comes from. It's a biosphere. It's a Cape biosphere. So the company is named after the biosphere. This is where we source the enzymes, and these enzymes are very unique in terms of their characteristics and the performance. And the environment is quite harsh, meaning they have adapted to that environment in order for that environment to thrive. And we translate that environment now in the laboratory by producing enzymes that are coming from that environment. And these enzymes are proven to be very instrumental in a diagnostic development. So that's sort of what sets us apart. The quality is good. We benchmark them against those that are imported into the country. And most of them don't even come close to the functionality that we have been observing. And we also do what we call bioprospecting in a marine environment, because marine also have biodiversity. And this biodiversity has been used now to populate what we call our applied genomics platform, which is artificial intelligence backed now, for us to be able to rationalize and select best-in-class technologies. Before we even produce them, we have already developed algorithms for that, so that we know once we develop a diagnostic tool, we know how it's going to perform because of the enzymes that are backing this kit. The key components of diagnostic kits are enzymes. And these are the enzymes that are really placing us on the global map. We've got these enzymes now being distributed in Canada, US, India, now entering Europe, and they're also in some of the African countries. We just need to amplify the reach and ensure that all researchers have access to these critical technologies in Africa.
That's going to be quite important to make sure that you're reaching more scientists with your unique enzyme products that are being developed from the rich biodiverse Cape environment where you are bioprospecting, but also from the marine environment. And I think that, you know, it's really very interesting that you're tapping into AI to really enhance your discovery processes to actually prospect, to discover new products from that rich environment that you have. So what are some of the enzyme kits that you have developed? What do they do? Just talk to us about some of the applications and how they are empowering scientists.
So the first thing that I want to highlight is that because they are for DNA analysis, right? So we have a lot of crime in South Africa and in Africa. And crime scene detection and rape case, solving, these are critical reagents for that. So we should be able to solve crime in Africa. But not only that, we also have viruses that tend to spontaneously infect Africans, and all of them have what we call nucleic acids, which are either DNA or RNA. So these enzymes are able to detect these viruses. They can also be used for genetic testing, paternity testing, not only for just diagnostic, but also for those kind of applications. They can be used for agricultural research, researching pathogens that infect plants or crops. They also used to actually analyze the genetics of the plants, the crops, to ensure food security. They are used in different industries. You've got enzymes that are used for cloning, making constructs for vaccine development or for drug development. They are so universal that that's why I spoke about the value chain needing to be expanded, because there's so many things that can be done from the resources that we already have in our portfolio. And we are expanding that rapidly to ensure that we cover even other industry, for animal food processing, the other industrial applications like cosmetics, because we still need enzymes. So enzymes are used across different industries. Even some of the tables that we have are polished by some of the enzymes that are critical in making sure that the structure and the texture of this equipment is maintained. They are in chemistry, they are all over. So we are sitting at the center of tools that are critical for life in essence, and our economic prospects. And we need to expand them, because these products can also be sourced on the entire continent, because Africa is endowed not only with mineral reserve, but also biological reserves. Biological mining is what we do. Bioprospecting is the mining that we do, but we mine genomic data in this case, which is rich in Africa. These are untapped resources across the continent that can be used to really change the lives of Africans and that of the world, obviously.
You know, Daniel, I think that's a really, really important thing that you're doing in terms of the bioprospecting and documenting that genetic diversity in plants, and then applying that. And you have such a wide range of applications in the food industry, in the cosmetic industry, forensic sciences, genotyping in terms of, identifying paternity and other, I'm sure, disease sort of genotyping processes that are out there. So I think that means CapeBio has a massive potential in terms of, your reach in different industries, agribusiness, you name it, all of those, you're able to service them. So it's a huge area, and I can see why you need more people to be involved in all of these processes and document some of, or identifying in the bioprospecting processes that you have to do. Now, I had a conversation, Daniel, with Michel Sidibe. He's the African Union Special Envoy to the African Medicines Agency, which, by the way, just got ratified on the 5th of November. So yay, congratulations. I think it's going to make your lives so much easier when you're trying to expand your reach and bring your products to more people across the continent. But one of the things that Michel was lamenting is that, Africa having the greatest burden of HIV and being the West affected continent, it does not have a single manufacturer of rapid diagnostics for HIV. Where do you see the greatest needs in terms of, diagnostics, because you're already involved in this space? Where do you think that we need to be doing more work, and which direction are you interested in taking CapeBio towards, diagnostics in particular?
Absolutely. So the platform that we have built, which is now approved by regulators, can be easily, used for HIV detection, because they use the same enzyme cocktails. The only thing that we need, and we have already started with that project, are what we call oligos, which are the short sequences of DNA that are able to bind to the virus from the sample. So that's what we're trying to achieve. We achieve 10 copies per mil from this assay. We believe that we can achieve the same with HIV viral load detection for people that are on ARV treatment, because they need to understand, they need to know, the clinicians need to know, where they stand, so that they're able to be, to be assisted in terms of managing the disease. So we are definitely tapping into HIV and other diseases that are prone to Africa, Ebola, you name them. We have the full panel of the diseases that are prone to Africa that we are targeting from next year. We'll be releasing quite a lot of products from there. But we also saying, as a company, we have our AI strategy. And one of the platforms that we are building is a point of care detection using the same reagents where, we have what we call lab on chip technologies that will be coming through, where basically we have a small device that can fit within your hand, and you use your mobile cell phone basically to interpret the results. You can drop your sample there, whichever sample that you drop on that device, and then it's able to read, and tell you exactly what you have, if you're targeting particular diseases or you suspect it's a certain infection. And then the app will be able to interpret the results for you. So this point of care, revolution is ongoing around the world. And we want to make sure that as Africa, we also have our own solutions, for the innovations that are going to change the world of diagnostics in the future. However, the traditional methods of detection are still going to be there, because it's going to take us a bit of time for us to fully be in use of these kind of devices in the near future. So we want to already start in that process, ensuring that we are able to provide tools that are essential to Africa. Africa being mostly rural with lack of infrastructure, we need to bring portable infrastructure that is affordable, that it can be user-friendly and be easily interpreted in different languages in Africa, so that we really play a prominent role in the diagnostic space in Africa.
That is such an important area. And I think, Daniel, one that we are not talking about enough in terms of the needs and also doing more, where at the moment it's all about vaccines and so forth. But I fear that we might of course, that's very important, but I don't know whether we're talking enough about the needs for these kinds of things, diagnostics, for at the point of care in particular. One of the things that we've been looking at, Daniel, at Medicines for Africa, is the area of neglected tropical diseases. More than 250 million people are affected by these diseases, and they don't have rapid diagnostics, and when you look at the sheer numbers and volumes of what would be needed, it's staggering. And yet we are not discussing how we can bring those kinds of products. So I think this is really, really important, and perhaps one of the areas that you, I'm sure, are already looking at in terms of what can be done there in order to improve diagnostic detection, because that is the starting point to be able to address that enormous burden of disease that we are dealing with in our communities with, neglected tropical diseases. Now, in terms of then, facilitating the expansion and development across this value chain that you talked about, the enormous value chain that has so many components. Collaboration and partnership is obviously one of the ways that a small company like CapeBio would need to probably, or I'm sure you're doing it already, to look into in order to expand and strengthen your capabilities. So can you talk to us about the kind of partnerships that you are already creating in South Africa, across the continent, to help you to succeed and of course to expand your reach so that you're able to bring or to develop more products across all these huge needs that we have on the continent?
Absolutely. Maybe before I expand on that, maybe to also touch on what you touched on around the tropical diseases. One of the key strategies that we've been trying to devise and implement is exactly what you say now. Finding partners in these countries, and ensuring that they have necessary reagents and capabilities to develop their own diagnostics. I mean, in partnership with us, we are more than happy to share our know-how and transfer that knowledge so that they're able to resolve those issues that they have in terms of their healthcare. This requires that African governments need to come on board, because we cannot do this as a private sector by ourselves. We need to work with government. So the challenges that we have on the continent is that government is so distant from the industry, especially around the healthcare. We come from South Africa. We don't really want to own these operations in Africa. We are there as partners, because we share the same challenges as Africa, and we have to find common objectives where we work together and resolve these issues. So in terms of partnerships that we really look at, around research and development, we need to understand, the territory that we want to bring about the impact. For instance, if you take Mozambique, we know the challenges when it comes to tropical diseases in Mozambique. We know malaria is dominantly creating havoc in Mozambique and neighboring countries, and other countries, obviously, like Angola and Congo, with Ebola as well. So when we have local scientists and local role players that understand the problems that they have in each country, because South Africa doesn't have malaria or Ebola, so we only understand our own problem with sexual transmitted diseases. Therefore, the cases are not the same. So we need local players so that they come on board to say, this is our problem, you have reagents for this, let's develop tools that are able to manage these kind of diseases. So we're also looking at, how we can set up, facilities so that we stock up reagents that are required for national rollouts. So we're looking for partners that are able to take up these products and roll them out, and even repackage them, make their own diagnostic kits for that purpose. Because we have to expand this value chain. We have to make sure that we include as many role players as possible in this regard.
Government participation is obviously a very critical element to your ability to expand your reach, because at the end of the day, they are the custodians of health in countries. They know exactly where the challenges are, and so that's a very important partner. I can see the need for that. Thank you for joining us in the first part of our conversation with Dr. Daniel Ndima, the CEO of CapeBio Technologies in South Africa. Join me, Lenias Hwenda, as we continue our conversation with Dr. Daniel Ndima, the CEO of CapeBio, a South African applied genomics biotechnology company that develops molecular biology reagents, enzymes, and kits to empower African scientists and research and development institutions to innovate in their academic research and diagnostics development. Now, one of the greatest challenges that I see for biotech across the African continent, companies like CapeBio, is how they are going to be able to get market share in a market that is dominated by big players like BD, Biosciences, and many others who have a long history serving the African market. And I would like to see us talk more about how we are going to enable companies such as these, which are nascent and need to be nurtured in order to be able to grow. And that growing will only happen if they're able to actually gain market access. What has been your experience, Daniel? What are your biggest challenges in achieving, or reaching new markets? And what kind of support have you been receiving so far?
So from my assessment, I've realized that governments are the biggest clientele in the industry, because if you speak about South Africa, I'm sure over 70% of the population rely on government health provision or healthcare provision, right? So that means that over 70% of the market is government in South Africa. If governments are not making it deliberate intention to empower companies that are mushrooming out of their own countries, then they are setting up themselves for failure, because you saw what happened in the first wave of the pandemic, that the countries that have these capabilities locked the supply chain. Today, we've got Omicron. Some of the flights are grounded. What that happens is that their very same healthcare system is going to be affected and brought to its knees. They need to nurture these kind of companies from the ground up, ensure that they give them the market deliberately. They must make it intentional. So to ensure that these companies do not only provide cushion in times of need, but they also are creating necessary jobs for a large, population of young people on the continent that require these jobs. It's not about providing these tools for them to be self-sustainable, but it's also about growing the future, that is the youth. And if they are neglecting their role, and they keep on importing while they have solutions, they are basically shooting themselves in the feet in the long term, because when the system started to crack, they have no one to blame but themselves. So across the continent, these young companies, whether they are in my industry or in any other industry, their governments need to make deliberate intention to ensure that they have a share of that market. The private sector will follow on. The private sector often follows what they see in terms of the government prioritization. If the government is not prioritizing their own, they also tend to relax. So they normally take leadership from the government. So I repeat, there must be a deliberate intention to empower African companies by African governments. They have no excuse whatsoever not to do that. If they do that, then they are basically selling out their own people.
Yes, that is very clear. Governments have to really take deliberate action to empower and facilitate for the success of African startups and biotechs like yourselves. And you're right, because like when the borders are closed, it means products aren't able to come in, which means in fact, which makes companies such as this, even more important to make sure that our economies continue to thrive, to run without necessarily being too dependent on external parties. So Daniel, you are a strong advocate for science that creates jobs and as a way of addressing poverty and contributing to national development of economies across the continent. Tell me more about your thinking around this issue, because I think it's something that we don't always put together, the need for health security, or for startups that develop products that ensures health security, and how that is actually a foundation for reducing poverty across the continent and making sure that we don't leave so many people behind. Just talk to us a little bit more about your thinking about this area.
My thinking around this area is this, right? At the center of life is science. I spoke about different value chains that are enabled by some of the interventions that we have. Obviously, there are other role players that have different interventions, but let's take your living, your quality of living right now. I'm sure it's very expensive. So is mine. Critical to our well-being and livelihood and our economic prosperity is science. And science creates these different value chains, and these different value chains create jobs, and they improve quality of life. They reduce the cost of living. Your medical aid bills are high because the doctors take your blood samples, whatever sample that they take, to a laboratory. Laboratory imports the reagents, they pay the jobs that are created in other countries, transportation of those reagents, custom duties, and the distributors at their markup, and the lab has to make their markup. What that does is that it triples, more than triple. You are supposedly a fee that you are supposed to pay. And secondly, you are not only eroding the tax base, of the population in terms of their contribution, you are actually exporting it. While you could be using it to ensure that they're self-sustainable. Well, I'm not saying you shouldn't import. You should import, but you must manage that. You must also have your own capabilities internally. Because our living standards are expensive in Africa because we rely on external sources to manage our health, to manage our food, to manage our transportation, to manage everything about our lives. So we are at the receiving end, and you realize that the same access that you are requiring in Africa is 10 times more than if you would be living in America. Why? Because America is vibrant. It created that vibrant economy. And they were very intentional from the onset around the healthcare. They make sure, even today, they are still prioritizing their own companies to ensure that they grow and they multiply globally. So at the center of our lives is science, and science is able to create these different value chains. These different value chains create jobs, they improve quality of life, they save lives, they ensure that we live good life that is long, that is enjoyable. And without science, we will always beg, even for the simplest thing that one can reach without stretching their hand, because we allowed ourselves to be complacent enough to rely on international brands that whose purpose is only to make money. They are not here to improve quality of your life. They are here to make money. You yourself have to make sure that you establish entities that are able to improve quality of life in your country. And this is where we really want to play. This is what I believe. I believe Africa has potential to develop their own tools to take care of their own affairs when it comes to healthcare provision. And we need to make sure that we amplify that rapidly, because COVID-19 has taught us that should anything happen, we will be left in the dark. And if the time was right for us to rise up. That time is now. There is no other time, otherwise it will be too late. We have to explore this free trade agreement. We have to explore this new amendment that you spoke about from from Africa. I think CDC, AU. We have to make sure that we use these instruments to advance Africa's prosperity. Otherwise, we'll be too late. 2022 is going to be too late. We need to start now. We've got a couple of weeks before 2022, but I think 2022 has to be a construction, year for Africa's healthcare.
That's absolutely right. And I think, companies like CapeBio, you are really a testament that there is a lot of capacity and potential in Africa, only if we invest in it, though, to enable it so that it can actually do what many people are capable of doing. And you're right, the point you make about the awakening that has come as a result of COVID. I think a lot more of our leaders now understand what this means. We started Medicines for Africa a long time before COVID came, and we had great difficulty explaining the value proposition of the need to reduce the cost drivers that you just elaborated, that increases the value of healthcare. The products, the prices tripling because of markups, because of the way the supply chain is structured. So these are incredibly important points. But now, from what you have seen, so there has been this awakening that everybody, at least from where I'm sitting, it seems that governments now are sitting up and understanding for the first time why this is so important for national development, for our development agenda everywhere across the continent. Are you seeing governments or any parties involved in financing science, private sector, and so forth? Are you seeing more investment in science, a recognition of what, that importance that you just explained for driving the development of economies on the continent? What are you seeing?
Let me reflect on my experience with South Africa. I think our Department of Science and Innovation has done fantastically very well. The capabilities that they invested in some time back, they actually yielded a lot of results during this pandemic. We talk about capabilities around ventilators. We develop our own ventilators. Capabilities around genomic surveillance, which was started a long time ago. They are paying the yields. We were supported by them, and here we are. And they are supporting many other projects in the country. And all these projects, how the government of South Africa has positioned them is that they need to benefit not only South Africa, they must also benefit Africa, meaning they are accessible to the entire continent. I think South Africa has been clear and crystal around making sure that everything that we do, if we succeed, it must also benefit the entire continent. So in that regard, I think our government in a science space has been doing fantastically very well. By the way, when we realized that there was this virus, and we knew that it was coming to South Africa, it is the Department of Science and Innovation that assembled all stakeholders from academia, research councils, and the industry. Together, we were sitting with some of the people that you had interacted with in one big group. I think we used a Zoom at that time. And then we started to, being coordinated by Department of Science and Innovation, we started putting ourselves into different clusters. So there was a diagnostic cluster, there were a vaccine cluster, and there was a ventilator cluster, there was a genomic surveillance cluster. There were so many other clusters that actually contributed to the excellent science that we are seeing that is being praised across the world today. And all these people were in the same room until we broke away, and we found complementing factors in our activities. So, and the government did not only do that, they invested in those clusters to ensure that South Africa has a response strategy, and we still interact even today. When it comes to Africa, I don't think I've seen something like that happening in other African countries. However, we've always opened ourselves to work with different governments, and myself, I work with a few countries in SADC region, and really around diagnostics as well, around the strategies around diagnostics as well. So we need to see investments coming from government, because these governments don't even invest. You just speak to them, and the conversation ends somewhere there, but they don't really invest. But I have to say that they have tried their level best, especially around vaccines, to see how they can contribute in vaccine procurement. They've done very well in that regard, but we need to see more investments around building the capabilities that our Department of Science has done. Obviously, there's still a lot for them to do, but I think those capabilities that were built some 10 years ago, some 15 years ago, some 5 years ago, they really came to party in terms of need, and they are going to continue to be sustained going forward through a public-private partnership. And the South African private sector came on board. We can't neglect the role of the private sector, because they probably make more money than government in all countries across the continent. In South Africa, there was Business for South Africa that formed. There was also formation of Solidarity Fund, and I'm talking about government, private sector coming together to tackle a common enemy. I think this has to be replicated across the continent, so that we are able to respond not only to this current pandemic, but even to future pandemics, because there will be future pandemics. There will be variants, as we see now with this one. We don't know when we'll stop having variants that create havoc on our continent. And that will affect us if we don't match our thoughts together with the private sector and the public sector, ensuring that we cushion their livelihoods and the lives of Africans. We protect them from any further destruction.
Yes, and that is the way, Daniel. I think that's the future. Public-private partnership, government working with its private sector to solve problems that are facing us in our communities and across the continent. Tell me, Daniel, have you mentioned, you commented that they've done very well in the area of vaccines. I'm curious, have you, as a diagnostic maker and making reagents as a company involved in that very, very necessary enabling environment for this industry, have you been able to benefit from all of the efforts to consolidate the market and make it easier for local manufacturers to bring their vaccines across the continent? Are there provisions for companies like yours to participate?
Vaccines in Africa are centrally managed by the government of South Africa. And they obviously, as I said earlier on, we got divided into different clusters. And those clusters were responsible for their own, industry, their expertise and knowledge in those sectors. We are not vaccine experts. Yes, we have research and development projects around the space as well, but not in terms of the distribution value chain, because we tend to want to learn the process of making things and being able to making sure that they're in the hands of the targeted individuals. So we're not yet there, and we haven't participated in procurement of vaccines, but we've always availed ourselves where we are needed to use our expertise where we can, in terms whether it's from information sharing, in terms of our knowledge, in terms of our own assessment, because this is a science. I mean, in our company, of them have worked with vaccines before, and they understand, the vaccine role in ensuring the safety of our lives against, a pathogen like this one. But I have to say that I've left that space to people that are more experienced and more knowledgeable, that have financial resources to do that. And I think the state has picked up the partners around that. And, fortunately, we were given a room around our diagnostics. And, in terms of benefiting from the local market with our diagnostics, like I said earlier on, the government needs to make intentional decision around making sure that they support companies like ours, because we are still, sort of being bullied by multinationals, even with our own government procurement. We need to make sure that we support local innovations, because we can have a vaccine developed locally. But the question would be, would it be taken by government? Because if you struggle to get your diagnostics across the board, how about the vaccine that can be developed? Meaning the multinational will still benefit even in that regard. But I have to commend South African government and the private sector on vaccine rollout. And they did fantastically very well in terms of ensuring that all South Africans have access to vaccination sites, and they're able to be vaccinated free of charge. And I think it's a milestone that people don't often recognize, that it's through a very intensive collaboration and effort from the industry and the government.
Absolutely. So the South African government has done very well in that regard. But what would you ask people sitting at the African Union, the Africa CDC? What would you like to see more of? What would you like them to be doing to help you with your products to reach more countries beyond South Africa, so that you can serve more scientists and empower more scientists on the continent?
The key thing, we need to make sure that we strengthen the regulatory framework. And I heard from one of the panel discussions that I was part of with Doctors Without Borders, where a CDC representative was present, where they say that they're going to create a common denominator, a regulator that can cut across the continent. This will enable these countries to be able to develop their own diagnostics, and those diagnostics be regulated by this body, so that they conform to the international standards, which is something that I welcome. The second thing is, Africa CDC needs to be aware that there are PCR test kits in South Africa that can be rolled out throughout the continent that are way cheaper than what we're currently using, whether from China or from wherever. We are way affordable, and we will be supporting the African agenda of self-sustainable efforts around the healthcare. And by the way, South Africa has recently approved rapid test kits. That project and our project were both co-funded by the South African government. So we now have African rapid test kits and African PCR test kits. They need to be absorbed across the continent, because they are for the continent. Like I said earlier on, South Africa always does things not only for itself, but also for the continent. I think they need to leverage on existing capabilities and ensuring that we are able to partner with other role players in different countries, so that we can bring those tools to those countries.
No, absolutely. And the regulatory agency that you just speak about, that you would like to see, the African Medicines Agency, that is actually coming into effect, and they are in the process of transitioning from the political process of putting it in place to the sort of implementation stage, where they are actually now looking at where should it be sitting, which country will host it. So I think your wish is coming true very rapidly, at least in terms of the regulatory environment. But in terms of accommodating companies like yourselves to expand, to make sure that those locally produced diagnostic products are disseminated to many countries, that labs across the continent are using those. I think that's something for sure that we need to see more efforts for those specific products. A lot of things being done for vaccines, but I think we need to have conversations that expands beyond the vaccines and think about that ecosystem and how to make sure companies like CapeBio are also included in those efforts. Now, just to finish, Daniel, so presumably as a young, vibrant startup company, you're looking for partners to help you with different challenges or to expand your capabilities. Just leave us with some thoughts on the kinds of partners you might be looking for, what sort of capabilities you're trying to expand in so that those who may have those things might be able to reach out to you when they listen to this conversation.
Thank you. For the first time, we have agreed as a company to also participate in technology transfer of our capabilities to countries in Africa that would be willing to manufacture their own diagnostic kits. So talking about that regulator will then come through. But some countries already have their own regulators, which is good. So if the community of scientists want to manufacture their own diagnostic test kits, we are entertaining proposals. We are not only transferring knowledge, but we're ensuring that their setup is compliant with the regulators, because we have done it. So we want to make sure that they follow even better processes to ensure that they have quality manufacturing processes, assembling of test kits and distribution in their countries, with us giving them freedom to operate, whether regionally or countrywide. We are also helping other countries in setting up their own diagnostic labs for COVID testing, but even for other diseases. So we have done that in a number of select countries. We want to expand this to ensure that each country has its own capacity and capability to test, not only for COVID but also for other diseases that are troublesome in those countries. So we're setting up labs, but we also are ready to transfer our knowledge to the rest of the continent so that we expand on the impact that we are after as a company.
That's really, I think that's major, Daniel, that you want to go on this mission to partner and bring your technology to other countries so that it's localized. And I think that's a very smart way of overcoming the barriers, the cross-border trading barriers that exist right now. I know we have the African continental free trade area that is already operational, but I think for companies to be able to benefit from that, that's probably going to take quite some time for it to be implemented and for it to be obvious how you can take advantage of that. And I think this is a very clever way of ensuring that your products are localized and it could be within a region and so forth. And let's have a conversation after this, because we've just been having conversations about exactly what you're looking for. And I think that there are areas that I can guide you to perhaps to take another look at in terms of developing that idea. But any closing thoughts that you have, Daniel? Would you like to say about CapeBio before we close?
Not much to say, but to just thank our investors, East Squared Investments, South African government, and a lot of partners that we have in the country, but also in Africa, across the world, that have been supporting us continuously, ensuring that we realize the vision of creating innovative solutions that impact life in Africa and beyond. We are under this purpose. This is what we live for as a company, to ensure that we improve quality of life in Africa and beyond. And I thank you for inviting us to be part of this session, Medicines for Africa. I think you are doing a fantastic job in our industry, and we should endorse the work that you do as an industry and ensure that the voices that come to these sessions are actually amplified throughout the continent, so that we can all collectively drive healthcare innovation in Africa for the benefit of Africans and people beyond our continent. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Daniel.